All right. Now, we want to talk about issues of children in Kenya when it comes to adoption, foster care rather, and also the children's organizations that take care of some of these children. In our studio, we have Honorable Millie Odhiambo, the Member of Parliament of Mbita, and also Roy Kamenju, who's an advocate of the High Court. And joining us also from a city center studio is Alice Carrier, who's also a member of the Association of the Charitable Children's Institution of Kenya. So the two ladies and the gentleman will try and explain to us more about this miscellaneous amendments to the Children's Act, giving the Child Welfare Society of Kenya a decisive say in their affairs, which opponents say the amendment will make other institutions relevant. Honorable Millie Odhiambo, you're in Parliament. How true is that?
Well, I think it's largely true. The Miscellaneous Amendment Bill has provisions that, several provisions in relation to adoption, not just adoption, but really introducing a lot of things relating to Child Welfare Society of Kenya. But the primary thing, to put it in summary from what I have read, is that what it tries to do is to make the Child Welfare Society of Kenya what is called a national adoption agency, and then give it certain powers, which are, sort of overall over other agencies. Now, the other thing is there is also a further amendment that is proposed by Honorable Gladys Wanga, which I find even more dangerous. The ones by Honorable Gladys Wanga then now creates this as an authority, and then gives it, it gives it the status of a body corporate with its own succession, gives it really far and wide powers.
Okay.
My problem with that is that I would love nothing more than the government setting up an authority for children. But setting up an authority for children means you probably need to do away with the National Council for Children's Services, do away with the Children's Department, so that you don't have duplication of efforts, or then infuse them there. But then it must be done logically and with the participation of people in the sector. There has been a 10-year period where people have been working around amendment of the Children's Act, and none of that has come up. Okay. It only came up when Child Welfare Society of Kenya was gazetted and given a different status from a non-governmental organization to some quasi-government body. And from that point, which is not bad for them, because then it enables them to get a little more money from being an NGO to a body that can now receive a lot of money from the government in billions. But that doesn't mean we kill the other players in the sector. So from your explanation, Honorable Millie, it is right for these other players in this sector to be worried at this time? Yes, they do. They need to be worried, especially those in the adoption sector. Because what this amendment is doing is almost making the Child Welfare Society, they are very cleverly trying to make Child Welfare Society the adoption committee. And there's already an adoption committee. So what are we doing with an adoption committee? Yes, there have been problems in relation to adoption, but the way to deal with it is not to create another non-governmental organization with the same interests. Let me say that. I sat in the Child Welfare Society of Kenya adoption committee before I joined Parliament. So I have very fond feelings for Child Welfare Society of Kenya. My mother worked in Child Welfare Society of Kenya. But that doesn't mean you do things wrong. I think the government has done very well in giving Child Welfare Society of Kenya the status that it has now, and giving it the budgetary allocation that it has now, which is, as I've said, runs in billions, and which even the department doesn't have. But I think we should not kill other institutions working with children just so that Child Welfare Society can exist. What we are actually doing by that amendment would be akin to creating an authority to regulate media and making KTN in charge of it. So you would be oversighting Citizen, and how ridiculous is that? I think let us have a different player checking what Child Welfare Society of Kenya is doing, because Child Welfare Society of Kenya is a very interested body. And if they want to oversight, then they need to let go of their role of adoption.
Okay.
Because you can't have those two at the same time. You can't be an adoption agency and also oversight others who are adopting.
Okay.
It is wrong.
Okay, Mr. Ray Kamenju,
yes.
You've heard what Honorable Millie has explained.
Yes.
So what is the way forward?
I think before I first of all talk about the way forward, I think the legitimate concern in some quarters in our country with regards to the adoption sector and with regards to the proposed amendments is the key fear is that we'll have a situation where we have a government body, a government society appears to have a monopoly. And that is the key fear or the main fear individuals, be it children's homes, be it private adoption societies have. With regards to these amendments, you note that our key attention or a lot of attention has been put to adoption. Because with adoption is that it's a critical form of care that is offered to abandoned children. And in our country, we have room for the government adoption society and we have room for the private adoption societies. Now, if you have, as she has put it, as Honorable Member Millie has put it, you have a national adoption society. Does that mean that government officers or even the courts themselves will not be in a position to work with these private societies? It is possible, because in the past we have seen that if there is an impression that has been made to government officers that you have to work with this government society, there is a likelihood you'll find that private societies, adoption societies and private homes will no longer be in a position to carry out their work, where we've had significant investment in terms of capacity and in terms of their ability to work.
Okay.
What is the way forward? I would wish that there would be more inclusion in terms of these amendments. First of all, there needs to be a wholehearted discussion with regard to the amendments that have been put across. And I would be possibly more confident of the sincerity of the amendments if we can have a holistic view of the Children's Act.
Okay, and I was getting that actually because Honorable Millie, you've had Mr. Kamenju say there needs to be a consultative, sort of like a consultative forum, which begs the question, were these stakeholders consulted? And if they were consulted, was their concern, taken in?
Well, I know that Parliament tried to do some public participation, and the organizations that gave their views to the Justice Committee, and I have had occasion to look at the memorandum, and they were totally opposed to these amendments. And I can tell you that even procedurally, the amendments that are proposed by Honorable Wanga has come before Budget Committee, and we said that the amendment is going way beyond parliamentary procedure, because it is actually a money bill, what we consider a money bill, which then would require that it gets, concurrence from Treasury, which has not been done. But it was on the order paper, and it was going to be discussed, and it was going to be debated on, so even in terms of procedure, we are not following the procedure. So I'm very happy that the Speaker withdrew this bill. Perhaps one other thing that we are not saying is that there have been cases in court around these issues. I didn't know about it until this issue came up in Parliament, since I'm no longer very actively in the children's sector. I mean, or rather, I'm not an active participant. I don't go to court. I don't, do adoptions. I'm not like what I used to do before. Now I'm a legislator. So because of that, I wasn't aware that there was actually a case in court that was talking about giving, privileged treatment, which is discriminatory, to Child Welfare Society. And I'm told the court ruled on it. So what are we trying to do? We are trying to go against what the court did and bring an amendment. I would want to encourage my good friend Irene, who is the CEO of Child Welfare Society of Kenya, that it's not nice to push the envelope. God has been kind to Child Welfare Society of Kenya, that is also doing a very good job. I was there as a committee member, and I know it does a good job. But when you are doing a good job, it doesn't mean you kill others. But there's no reason to kill others because you are doing a good job.
These stakeholders have raised a concern about the amendments that are supposed to be in this bill.
Yes.
But somehow, their concern has been ignored. Why do you think their concerns were ignored? Is it for the interest of the child welfare?
I think there are issues around child welfare society. Okay. I don't know what those issues are, but I think the things that are being done there being done very unprocedurally around Child Welfare Society of Kenya. And if, for instance, I would want to say that if you want to establish an authority, sort of like a super authority on children's issues, to be honest, that would be a very good thing, because then it would get more funding, which the department has failed to get over years. And it would mean that you'd be providing cohesiveness on the children's issues, and there would be a lot more focus. But then, going through such a drastic measure requires more enhanced public participation, not through a miscellaneous amendment.
Yes. Okay.
It has to be a substantive participation. People in this sector have been working around the Children's Act for 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, since I left the civil society, it's not even 10, now it's going to almost 15. Since I left the civil society, guys have been working on comprehensive amendment to the Children's Act. And people are complaining. People have approached me telling me, you know, can you please intervene? Things are going, you know, against our wishes. Nobody seems to be listening to us. And there is a bit of name dropping, which I don't like. There's a bit of name dropping, which I don't like around the Child Welfare Society of Kenya.
Just to remind our viewers that we also have Alice Carrier from Association of Charitable Children Institutions of Kenya. She's rather joining us from our City Center studio, so we shall be engaging her just a few minutes later on. But before we bring her, Mr. Kamenju,
yes,
you've heard what Honorable Millie has said.
Yes.
Yes, those are stakeholders meeting.
Yes.
Somehow, not even somehow, their concerns were ignored.
Yes.
But you're talking about calling them back again to the negotiating table. How sure are we that when we come back to the negotiating table, things are going to be different?
To be more or less, to put it clearly, I do not think the views of the stakeholders will likely be taken into consideration, because I have personal experience with the specific agency we are talking about, that's Child Welfare Society of Kenya. But I would say that all is not lost. If, let's say, for example, Honorable Millie and possibly her friends, like-minded individuals, are not in a position to stop such a miscellaneous amendment, then we'll have no option but to go back to court and seek a review of such amendments or such regulation that has been passed. Because I do not think we are jealous of the Adoption Society. It should not appear as if we are jealous. The key concern for all stakeholders is that we should have a level playing field for all societies, for all children's homes. We should not have a government home being favored instead of a private home. That's the key concern. And this issue needs to be clarified, because at the end of the day, we have to secure the rights of the children who are in homes.
But their concern, Mr. Kamenju, that as much as you're trying to, you're trying to fight for the rights of these NGOs that take care of children, some NGOs that take care of children have been accused of actually child trafficking.
Yes. And I always say,
so don't you think
meet us at the table with facts and figures. If you can be able to table that we have had 16 cases, reported cases of trafficking, and these are the individuals who have been found guilty and are serving, because we actually have stiff penalties and punishments for individuals involved in trafficking, that will be fine. But to this date, I have never seen such facts and figures indicating that these are the number of people who have been found guilty. So all you need
is evidence.
We need evidence. And the second thing is, unfortunately, adoption is now appearing to be synonymous with trafficking, which is far from the truth. An adoption is a legal process that goes through the court process, involving the police, the children's office. Even child welfare is also involved as an adoption society if need be. We have the courts. So it will be very unfortunate for us to appear to say that all these individuals, even including lawyers and even the parents, were involved in the trafficking process.
And Honorable Millie, let's go down, let's draw this line to the common wananchi. Women who are not able to give birth, or women who are able to give birth but they decide to adopt children. What effect will the bill have on these women should it be implemented?
Well, before I get into that, what I can actually say in relation to what Wakili has just said, I think the challenge that we are facing in the sector is not just that people have a problem with Child Welfare Society of Kenya. But I sat myself in the adoption committee, and Child Welfare Society of Kenya itself is didn't have the capacity to be able to adopt, to deal with the cases in a timely manner. It was a challenge for us. So when all these players came, it was actually a blessing, if you ask me, And I know there were so many people in child welfare that were resistant. And I told them, no, I think it's a good thing, because the number of women who are seeking, or men or couples that are seeking to adopt children are very many. There are so many childless couples that are seeking to adopt children. But the capacity even of the Child Welfare Society of Kenya to deal with these cases was not sufficient. Definitely there are people who will abuse the system. I can tell you in about 10, 15 years ago, I dealt with a case where somebody wanted to adopt a child. Unfortunately, in this case, it came through the cradle, when I was still at the cradle. And when we actually started the process, it is good that I had officers who were very alert. And they noticed that one of those children was a child that was had a case at the cradle of a succession, or when the mother died, but I think the father was still there and the parents were there. So when we actually followed up, we discovered that this home was actually going to adopt a child that had relatives. And these people were being misled about, the status of the child. So there will always be people who are unscrupulous. How do you deal with that kind of case? You don't deal with that kind of case by giving an undue advantage to another agency doing the same adoptions over the other ones, giving them a policing or oversight role around against others. Why? Because when you have monopoly, people will tend to abuse that monopoly. What you will do is you will create charges against other agencies for no reason and kill them. I would say that what we need to do is enhance the capacity of the adoption committee, enhance the capacity of the National Children's Services, enhance the capacity of the Children's Department, so that they are able to do their work well. And if by any reason we want to change the Child Welfare Society into an authority, then redefine its role. It cannot play the role of an adoption agency, while at the same time be a policing agency. You cannot do those roles. So if we want it to be the authority for children, I don't think there's a problem having authority for children, so long as we also find a way of harmonizing or rationalizing the roles of other government, I'm not talking even of private sector here, government agencies working with children, because there's a disquiet from the department itself. There's a disquiet that they are being muzzled, they are being killed. The Department of Children that has history and has mandate. And then I also have a problem as a lawyer. When you say, let us designate the Child Welfare Society as a national adoption society. In the definition section of the Children Act, there is no definition of a national adoption agency. So what are you saying? You are saying we are creating this amorphous thing called National Adoption Agency and giving it powers that we don't know. And that is where abuse begins. So we must do this thing properly. If you want to bring Child Welfare Society of Kenya as an authority, do it properly. Let us rationalize other departments. What are their roles? Do not give them conflicting roles. And then do not give it a role that is also internally conflicting. That does not allow for, checks and balances within itself as an organization.
And let me just bring in Alice Carrier before you respond to the question I'd asked you earlier about, will it have sort of a major impact on couples who are trying to...
Definitely it will.
So just hold on to that thought. So I'd like us to cross over to a City Center studio to talk to Alice Carrier, but she'll be joining us by way of phone. Alice is from the Association of Charitable Children Institutions of Kenya, so she's joining us by way of phone. Alice, good morning. And I'm sure you've heard the conversation right from our studio here, what Honorable Millie has said and what Mr. Kamenju has said about this whole miscellaneous amendment to the Child's Act, which is yet to, to be passed. What do you have to say about it? Where do you think these institutions have a right to oppose?
Yes, they have. Hello?
I can hear you. Carrier, kindly continue.
They have a right to oppose, because the amendment, all the stakeholders have been involved for the past like 10 years in amending the whole act, because it had a lot of major amendments. It was agreed that we should have we should look at it holistically. And this year in March, the Children Amendment Bill 2018 was validated by all the stakeholders. And we can't understand thereafter, in around April, a miscellaneous amendment bill taken in by child welfare, how it went to the parliament. So we can't understand the motive behind it.
Okay, and Alice, you've actually, echoed the sentiments of Honorable Millie, saying that, of course, those meeting with stakeholders, your concerns were taken in, but somehow it was ignored. So was there a need for that stakeholders meeting?
We can't understand, because a lot of resources has been used. There was even Children's Voices last year. The National Council of Children's Services, the body that is mandated in policy formulation in issues of children welfare, it went aloud the country collecting views from the children, from all the stakeholders. And this year we were called in a forum in Nairobi to validate the Children Amendment Bill. As far as we know this far, we can't tell where that amendment bill. And also, when the Miscellaneous Amendment Bill that was introduced by Child Welfare in April this year was introduced, it was trying to give or to vest power in the PS, in the Cabinet Secretary, in controlling the charitable children institution as well as the adoption society. And thereafter, this August, Honorable Wanga also introduced other new amendments in the same miscellaneous amendment bill that showed like there is a takeover by the child welfare, the NCCS, that is the National Council of Children's Services, the Department of Children's Services, the Charitable Children Institution, and the Adoption Society. So how can we allow a monopoly in the children's sector that will resort to the abuse of power?
Okay, Alice, just hold on to your thought right there, because I'd like us to take a short commercial break, but we're still coming back with this discussion of child welfare in the country. And when we come back, we would like to know whether, should this amendment be implemented, what is the effect when it comes to couples who are not able to have children and they want to adopt? What effect does it have on them? And also probably talk about some of the ultra-modern CCI centers that are being built in different, in all the 47 counties by the government. So all that after the short commercial break.